Steve, you sent me this article, and it's a bit of a lengthy article, and I read it through, and I said, my goodness, we're going to have fun talking about it because there's a lot of detail in this. And I was talking about it with Encryptus, who's helping me with the show behind the scenes, and like I didn't know about this until you sent it to me. I think I've heard the name Cory Mills from time to time, but this seems like a mildly interesting big story, if not only for the entire sub element of it, of the Cory Mills element, of the involvement of the FBI potentially, or of rogue elements within the FBI. And it's going to, dovetail into a lot of what we're going to discuss after this. But you published this piece last week and then flipped it to me. And that's how we came about having this interview live stream. I mean, I'll flesh this out as we get through this, but tell us what's going on with Cory Mills, what the underlying story is that has then bled into what might be rogue FBI agents running cover for whomever. You're going to tell me this, but what's the underlying story with Cory Mills, and how does it get the FBI involved?
Here's the simplicity of the story arc. A couple of journalists from Blaze Media, including Glenn Beck, caught Cory Mills in a lie that he told them to their face. This was late February. We'll go back. We'll come back to that, the genesis of the story. As a result of that, it's like, okay, if you told me one lie, what else are you lying about? So journalists from Blaze Media, there's probably been about 4 or 5, 6 of us working on this particular story, began to pull back the layers on who he is. And we suddenly discovered that he's had years-long accusations of stolen valor, things that occurred or didn't occur during his military career, which was only about 4 or 5 years, and then things that occurred and must not really have occurred during his time working for a military contractor over in, the desert, Middle East. And then all of the sources that were coming forward and the organizations that actually deal with these kinds of things, issues of stolen valor, had been compiling this information about him for some time.
And if I may, let me stop you right there. Just so, if for people who don't know who Cory Mills is, Republican, congressional representative for, I don't know what district it is of Florida. He's a Florida.
Yeah, 7th district of Florida.
How long has he been in politics for?
He just won his second term. So he only came into the Congress in the 2023 January. Okay,
and now he's the accusations of stolen valor. I mean, they can be more or less serious. When it came to what's his face, Tim Walz, and a lot of us harped on the stolen valor because not because it was potentially criminal, though there are laws that touch claims for stolen valor when it's used to defraud. But we made fun of him because you deserve to get made fun of for claiming to have carried a firearm or a gun in battle when you never did, and letting people believe that in order to add, grandeur to your personality. What were Cory Mills' allegations of stolen valor?
Having deeds of heroism and daring do that led to his Bronze Star, which actually what he got was he got a version of the Bronze Star that is nothing more than, every kid gets a trophy after the soccer game kind of award, where everybody at a certain rank in this one particular division, the general just does a blanket Bronze Star for everybody that whether you ever were even deployed or all you ever did was sit behind a desk and, you were an accountant, you got a Bronze Star, one of those types of awards. And then the other thing is, there's quite a few episodes. He claimed that he was blown up twice by IEDs. We have him on an hour-long conversation with one of our own journalists, where not only does he admit that he never was blown up by an IED, but he was only in one IED incident, although that his story, and it's still on his website, in which he campaigned on, was that he twice survived IED attacks. We have him admitting to us on a phone call on the record that that ain't exactly so. And then there was the stories of him being a ranger, which he wasn't. Then there's the stories of him being a trained sniper, which he wasn't. He was a medic. He was a trained medic. And then the stories go on and on from there. So there's others. So many of the individuals that served with him, as I said, both during his time in the Army, as well as with him when he was with a company called DynCorp, which is one of those Blackwater type military, contractors, private security contractors. They had issues there. In fact, it got so bad while he was at DynCorp, they even fired him for his alleged stolen valor issues. So there are people that have been working on this for years, and which brings us to, and again, I'm skipping over a lot, but this brings us to where we are today. These people that have been working on this for quite some time, back last November 24, a couple of them got approached by an FBI agent, legitimately an FBI agent, an email with the government email address and the letterhead and everything else.
And the FBI agent was Shay Talley Bradley?
Yep, Shay D. Talley Bradley.
Look, I always, you go for political orientation, and people assume, to see where this is going, they might assume that she was, conservative leaning, trying to protect Cory Mills, or just rogue. Do you know of her ideological perspective? Is she a lefty? Is she a righty? Or do you not know?
Know nothing about her politics. We do know that she retired from the Army as a full bird colonel. Yeah, she's a colonel was a retired Army colonel. So I think she did 10 years active duty, 19 years in the reserve. Sometime during the reserve period, when you're playing the role of weekend warrior, she joined the FBI. We don't actually know what her intake date was with the FBI, but she's been around there for a while now. And so this Shay Talley Bradley, or as I affectionately refer to as Agent Shay, she started reaching out to these individuals who for years have been compiling this information and putting together about allegations of Cory Mills' stolen valor. And when she presents herself to them, Viva, she is presenting herself to them as though she is investigating the allegations of stolen valor herself on behalf of a sanctioned referral from the FBI. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Is she's claiming to be running an authorized investigation. So these individuals who have been doing this for years, these are people that do this kind of thing because stolen valor is important to them. There's even an organization that for 20 years has been collecting information about these kind of things called Warriors of Valor. That's what they do. They hunt down allegations or they hunt down incidences of stolen valor, but they also do the exact opposite, is they help those individuals who did in fact have something they should have been awarded for and were denied it for whatever reason. So they're working both sides.
If I can pause you there, actually, because on that point, to try to see, in French, we say les absents ont toujours tort. So those who aren't there are always wrong. Cory Mills, set aside the allegations of stolen valor, still has a pretty impressive resume as far as a military service goes. And so some question, why do you even have to exaggerate? Like Tim Walz, for example, the fact that he was in the National Guard for 16 years itself is honorable enough. Why even bother exaggerating? What was Cory? Did Cory offer any defense?
Yeah, let's just sit on that for a moment. Okay. Good question, but let's sit on that one for a moment. So when this agent Shay starts coming up to all of these sources of ours and presenting herself as doing a sanctioned investigation into Cory Mills' stolen valor, these people are ecstatic. Finally, we got this to the FBI, because in some cases they had been talking to the FDLE here in Florida. That's the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, who were doing investigations into stolen valor on Cory Mills themselves. And so they had been sharing information with FDLE in Florida. Now it's been escalated to the FBI. They're ecstatic. So they're just giving them everything. She's just piling on. I mean, these sources are giving them all the documents, all their research, everything that they have, because they think this is it. We got him, right? Except all of a sudden one day she goes, it's not really about stolen valor anymore for us. We're going to drop that. There's not enough there. There's too much plausible deniability for him. So, by the way, what do you know about his business dealings overseas? You see, because Cory Mills, since 2014-ish, after he married an Iraqi woman at the most notorious mosque in America, in Falls Church, Virginia, by one of the most notorious and radicalized imams in the faith, Islam.
One of the imams imams who I now know was an unindicted co-conspirator during the first World Trade Center bombing, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct, in 1993. Okay. Exactly correct. An imam who absolutely would not have married Cory Mills if he was, in fact, a Christian or Catholic, as he claimed to be at the time. Would not have married him by rule. They couldn't have. And certainly not inside the mosque and not with a, Islamic ceremony as it was performed. And so the agent switches gears and says, we at the FBI are no longer investigating him for stolen valor. What do you know about his business dealings?
This is still this is Shay Shay who's still doing this.
Yeah, this is Agent Shay Shay.
Okay, so Agent Shay Shay says they might be thinking, oh, maybe I've opened a box that's even more serious than the stolen valor allegations if this guy's involved in some shady international dealings. So I presume they're still interested in still collaborating or cooperating with this FBI agent who hasn't really, I know I'm getting ahead of the punchline, hasn't really identified herself as acting for and on behalf of the FBI in the context of an official investigation.
So, I said we're going to go back to the genesis of the story here in a moment, but bringing it forward towards the end of her investigative time in this is that at one point, if this was April 11th, one of our sources for our story, we've already been on the story for a month and a half, something of that to that effect. And one of our sources on April 11 did her second sit down interview in a Starbucks with Agent Shay Shay. And this is when Shay Shay told her, we're no longer interested in pursuing the stolen valor issues. What do you know about the business, his weapons trading business overseas? And then the agent asked this source, her name is Jade. She's actually, now, by the way, coincidentally, Agent Shay Shay just happens to live and work out of the Orlando resident agency of the FBI. That's Cory Mills District. And she sits down with Jade, who you see her lovely picture here on the screen right now.
Owner and operator of CoryMillsWatch.com. This is from your article, a website dedicated to investigating Mills. Okay.
Yeah. So that's her. I mean, that's what she's doing. She's operating a CoryMillsWatch.com. And so the agent sits down with her and then says, would you be interested in becoming a confidential human source and get paid for it?
I gotta ask a question. Do they talk salary? What do confidential human sources get from the Gretchen Whitmer Fednapping plot? I know it's like in the order of 50 to 60,000, but does it get to 100,000 if you do a really good job?
Oh yeah. No, as a matter of fact, one of my closest confidants in the entire intelligence community is the former highest paid CHS in FBI history. And
what was the ballpark?
Quite large. No, he would never let me talk about that.
And just there's not enough you could pay me because this. You'll tell me whether or not you have any faith in any of the institution or the individuals behind the FBI, but the rank and file, because to me it's like you're messing around with tentacles of an organization that you don't know where they're going to go next. You take that money, and that money it's definitely not free, and it's definitely with you for the rest of your life. Sorry, so I cut you off there. Okay, so carry on.
So you saw the photo of the young, lovely lady there, Jade. So Jade is offered the opportunity to be a CHS for the FBI. She said yes, because again, she's still believing that Agent Shay Shay is working a sanctioned investigation on behalf of the FBI to take out Cory Mills. Right?
Well, let me ask you another obvious question. Does Jade? Let me put it back here. That she said yes, and I presume she authorized you to run with the article. She doesn't mind people knowing that she accepted an offer to be a CHS for the FBI.
No, she does not. I mean, she gave us that information on the record, and the reason why is because she's just trying to get the truth out there about what happened to her and the other sources that we had on this story. Okay. And so she agrees to that, and then after she agrees to it, then Shay Shay becomes more specific and says, well, what we really need from you is we need you to go undercover for us to investigate another lady involved in this process.
Okay.
And now we get to go to the genesis of the story.
Who's the other lady that she's being asked to investigate?
So there was a big storm that hit.
This is wild. See, This is wild. This is straight out like it's just unless people know the players, they might not care about this, but this is wild level like House of Cards stuff that can cause people to have additional fears and concerns about the rank and file at the FBI. Okay, sorry. Now, who is the person that Agent Shay Shay is asking Jade to go potentially investigate?
So I'm a storyteller now. We have to go back in time a little bit, and we can now go to the genesis of the story, and I will reveal the answer to your question. So the genesis of this story begins in Western North Carolina, just a couple of days after Hurricane Helene went through Western North Carolina and just wiped it, wiped cities off the map up there. And Glenn Beck and two of our other reporters from the Blaze were on the helicopter with him up there, where they landed at one of the relief centers that had been set up by some special forces operatives, that sort of thing. And then they began to go interview FEMA and all the other things that were happening in those early days. And so the two journalists that arrived with Glenn Beck from the Blaze were our national correspondent and basically our riot chasing journalist, Julio Rosa, and then also Jill Savage, who hosts Blaze News Tonight in our program called The Mandate. All right. So Jill is there with Glenn, and they do their thing that day, and then they get back on the helicopter with Cory, because Cory's up there doing Cory Mills, Congressman Cory Mills. He's in the middle of a campaign in Florida, right? In late September, early March. He's in the not early October. He's in the middle of a battle in his home district and here in Florida. So he's up there doing Captain America stuff and rescuing people, with helicopters in Western North Carolina in the mountains there. Stuff that he's known for.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're on the helicopter and they're flying back to the airport so that Jill and Julio and Glenn Beck can go back to Dallas. And they're on the helicopter with Cory. And the congressman suddenly gets very melodramatic, and he starts telling the stories about him being very lonely. He's going through a divorce of his wife since 2014. They've been going through this divorce for, around 3 years. He's very lonely. He hasn't been with anybody in a year. And Viva, he's flirting with Jill. He's like, good-looking guy, congressman, made tens of millions of dollars in his weapons trading business. And, and he's flirting with Jill. They exchange numbers. They never go out, but they talk. She's in Dallas. He's in D.C. in Florida.
Is he divorced from his first wife at this point?
He is not divorced. But then you skip forward from the end of September of last year till the end of February of this year, and suddenly a news event happens in D.C. at Cory Mills' luxury penthouse apartment, and there's been cops called to his penthouse because of a domestic violence issue, in which was called in by his 27-year-old live-in Iranian girlfriend. And the police report says that they had been living together for over a year.
This is a girlfriend, not his initial wife. I do feel compelled to steel man for those who are not here, because I do remember at the time that he was doing good work for assisting in North Carolina. I remember that as you were talking about it. I remember this occurring, where he was, because he had access to helicopters, was doing what FEMA was incapable of doing, and I dare say receiving the praise that he deserved at the time.
As he has also done in Israel, as he has also done in I think Haiti, as he has done in Afghanistan.
Because my question is whether or not he is the true newsworthy element of the story, or the potentially rogue elements of the FBI. But okay, so he's doing this potentially flirting. Now he's got a girlfriend who's not his wife, but he's not divorced from his original wife that he married with. Okay. Okay. It's all right. So it's DC. It's okay. Adults are adults now. So we fast forward. There's a domestic disturbance that police are called for. Okay. Now what?
Well, you go back to, like I said, the last days of September or the first days of March when they're on the helicopter together, and he says, "I'm lonely. I haven't been with anybody in over a year. Going through a divorce." He's laying out the sob story as he's, basically using that as his pickup line for Jill. And so then suddenly in late February, this incident happens, and it becomes known that, well, actually he has been with somebody for over a year. That's who this we call her. Well, I better not say what we call her, but anyways, we'll go with her first name, Sarah. But anyway, so Sarah is outed as having been his live-in girlfriend for over a year at this point, and now you have the realization that 3 of our people at the Blaze have been lied to by the congressman. And the question then is if he's going to lie to us about that, what else is he lying about? And then it was game on.
Okay, it's interesting. I'm going to steel man a lot of this as we keep going, but so he lies. Yeah. There might be an argument as to whether or not he exaggerated or what's the word? There's a word for embellished his military service. Mm-hmm. He's in an unhappy marriage. People divorce all the time. People have affairs all the time. Set that aside. I'm very curious about this agent. So the agent Shay, who purportedly was looking into the stolen valor, then starts to move it out to his businesses. And so who was she asking Jade to be the CHS for to investigate?
There was only one other woman involved in all of this. None of the prime sources, none of the secondary sources and researchers outside of Jade. There's only 3 women involved in this story. It's Agent Shay Tally Bradley, former Army Colonel. There is our source, Jade, who runs CoryMillsWatch.com. And then the only other woman involved in this is Jill Savage, host of The Mandate on Blaze TV, who Cory was trying to pick up.
Okay. And so, okay. But so what is the sinister plot of what Shay is doing? Is Agent Shay trying to take down or take out, politically speaking, people, a Republican congressional member of Florida who, other than questionable, stolen valor about that, is this a political hit job on Cory Mills potentially, above and beyond?
Well, there's only 2 things there's only 2. Well, there's a third, but there's only 2 primary entities or individuals that Agent Shay could be working for. First of all, she works for the FBI. Ostensibly, that's what you first believe when she flashes your badge at one of our sources and says, "Hi, I'm with the FBI. I'm here to help." Reagan's famous, 9 words you don't want to hear.
It's especially scary when the FBI does it. I mean, the government's one thing, like they have animal rescue, whatever. But yes, okay.
And so you have the initial belief from the 3 sources that we quote in this story that they all believed that they were reporting to the FBI their research that they had been engaged in for many years in some cases. And then that rug is pulled out from underneath them. And then we want to talk about business dealings. In fact, she even went so far with another one of our sources and, don't send me anything else. Just stop. In fact, the quote was, whoa, don't send me anything else. And with Jade, Agent Shay said, no, don't send me any of these documents by my, to my FBI email address. Suddenly she's starting to change, and suddenly our sources are starting to get nervous and really wondering what she is investigating. Is she investigating Cory Mills, or is she investigating us? Is she looking in to see what we know about Congressman Mills?
Well, so it's interesting, and that was my initial reaction when reading your article, that she's acting as sort of, call it an intelligence defense contractor for Cory Mills. But then the more you talk about this, if this is a rogue FBI agent who maybe wants to take out Cory Mills because for politics, realizes that she can't do it on the stolen valor because there's not enough there, then starts looking into his arms dealing overseas and whatever, and maybe she'll take out 2 birds with 1 stone, try to take out Cory Mills, but if she can't, see what the Blaze knows and go after the Blaze and try to somehow sabotage the Blaze, because it doesn't seem like she's acting necessarily for and on behalf of Cory Mills at this point, though she doesn't seem to be I don't know what more she would need to take down or press charges or whatever, if she's indeed investigating Cory Mills. Do we know at all? Like, has it been confirmed who and on behalf of, in the context of what file she's even acting, or still not as of yet?
You know, this is you being a lawyer. This is where I have to be careful, and I have to use the word alleged and maybe and possibly and probably and could be, might be.
I believe my personal opinion.
Right. My personal opinion. Well, let me just. I want to read you something that we got, and it's in the story. And I encourage everybody to go to theblaze.com, find this story, and then this
share with everybody right now.
Yeah, and this was the fourth, Viva, in a series of stories we're doing on Cory Mills. This is our fourth one. This is not the first story on this. We're pretty deep into this right now, but embedded in the story itself is the actual language that the FBI gave me when we finally broke through to them, which is a whole nother story in itself. I mean, you don't break through to the top level of the FBI to get answers. And you know, and I know that the one pat claptrap answer you always get from the FBI whenever they ask you a question
on the existence of or any investigation, period.
That's correct. Now, my personal work on this story involved me speaking with our friends who are FBI whistleblowers. I have spoken to several retired FBI agents who did their 20 plus years, retired with honor. I have spoken to current existing FBI agents about this. I have read them this quote, and every one of them says, wow, just wow, never seen that from the Bureau in my entire career. And here's how it goes. We are not aware of the conduct in question, but will review the matter immediately, an FBI spokesperson told the Blaze. As always, any unethical behavior will be addressed swiftly and appropriately. Senior leadership has been made aware of the situation. And when I say senior leadership, I can tell you that we went all the way to the top on that.
And that'll be Cash or Deputy Director Bongino.
And General Counsel.
Okay, it's very interesting. I like you not to oversimplify or reduce this to high school drama. It sounds like you guys have issues with Cory because when someone's not honest with you, that'll leave a lasting impact. If the dirtiest of the dirt on Cory, there's the thing about whether or not he converted to Islam, getting married by a cleric who he says he didn't know was an unindicted co-conspirator. Okay, get divorced, fine, have an affair, fine. These are all things which I say you reduce your life expectancy and you reduce your financial success by doing these types of things, but it's to each their own. To me, so you guys, you might want the story on Cory. The question is here, is Agent Shea actually trying to take out, politically speaking, both Cory and or the Blaze? Because it doesn't sound like, it sounds like if she's a left-leaning, partisan, rank and file of the FBI, which we probably suspect there's 2/3 of, she might be doing this for her own fun or for her own network within the FBI, trying to take down respected representatives like Cory Mills, or respected journalists and journalism like the Blaze, or both, and gathering information to see what they can do internally with it.
Or the other possibility is that she was in fact collecting information for Congressman Mills so that he can get ahead of it and find out what these journalists know and what they're learning and what they have on him and what they're going to be publishing in the not too distant future. And again, if I'm to come down on one side of the story, that's the least nefarious of the options that we've already laid out and put on the table right now, is that she was working directly for him. Because here's what we do know. All right. First of all, it's absolutely impossible that the FBI is running an op, a legitimate investigation into a sitting member of Congress without the 7th floor of the Hoover building knowing about it. And it's not, because it can't happen. It has to go through multiple layers of approval. It's called a SIM. It's a special investigative matter. And and as a result of that, they have to get approval all the way up to the DOJ itself, probably from the Department of Justice. Now, because her investigation started during the last administration, maybe she did get permission from Merrick Garland. Maybe she did get permission from, Christopher Wray and his general counsel. Maybe that's where it all began. But the problem with that is that would be a keystroke away from anyone in the 7th floor of the Hoover building to find out what the case file is.
Yeah,
who initiated it.
Unless it was 3 keystrokes away because they already alt-control deleted that before the new administration came in. That's a very, very relevant fact that this was initiated, or at least it commenced under the Biden administration and not subsequent to. So the idea that this would be off the records or informal can be one of 2 things. It's either because Cory Mills asks for help from someone that he has a connection with, or she's doing it rogue for nefarious reasons as relates to Cory and or the Blaze. Do you know if they had any prior existing relationship, Cory and Detective Shea or Agent Shea?
We've not been able to determine that or make those connections yet. We're working through additional sources to try and see what those connections possibly be. I kind of doubt that there were connections going back to the military, although there may have been some overlap because she was around for a long time, longer than he was, obviously in the military. There could have been some overlap, but I don't think that there were any identifiable overlaps in deployments, that sort of thing. If I were to just conjecture right here, I would say they probably met at some wine and cheese party in Orlando at some political event, and he found out that she was a special investigator with the FBI. She's in his district. Hey, I've got a little problem. I've got these guys that are, looking into these lies about me, about stolen valor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I really just need to know what's going on. You think you could help me out with that a little bit? Something. I mean, that's my feelings on it. That's the most nefarious idea that I have, or least nefarious rather idea that I have right now.
Let me ask you this: what is the most nefarious that you've come up with, or that you've hypothesized?
You don't become an international arms trader without approval, and you're working for or on behest of the CIA.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
And you don't suddenly get a $228 million grant from the government within a year after marrying an Iraqi woman for a startup business.
Which administration was in power when that happened?
That would have been the Obama administration.
Yeah, or okay. So, where does it stand now? So the story got published. Have you asked for FOIA requests? I mean, have you made a FOIA request for any and all correspondence involving Agent Shea and or anyone else during a certain time frame?
We actually have all of the correspondence between Agent Shea and all of our sources. We have screenshots of everything, all of the text communications. This is the other thing. This is what began to make people nervous, and even our sources were nervous about this. And it's what attracted me at first, was all of her methods and operations, her policy, her procedures in her investigation with our sources never comported with typical FBI behavior. It was always really casual. There was never the second agent, the partner agent was never there in the personal. She never recorded any of the things that she did. She never told, you've got to, if you're talking to somebody, you can do it. You can do an interview over the phone with the FBI, and they'll say, okay, I'm going to record you. Is that okay? Yeah, it's okay. You'll hear a tone. When you hear the tone, then it's game on. She never recorded the sit-down meetings. She never took notes at the sit-down meetings. And so, it's like these bells are popping off in my head, something is wrong with this. And then in addition to that, when she started flipping on the story after getting all the information she could about stolen valor, wanted to know about the business trading, business deals, and then the recruitment to investigate this other lady, all of these things just did not add up. And so I have a very, very long list, a Rolodex full of guys in various intelligence departments and communities, the DOD, things like that. When I have questions about how things are handled in those bureaus, those agencies, those departments, I call them and ask them, is this and they're like you, they're gonna hold my feet to the fire and say, yeah, I do that. I've done casual interviews just over a cup of coffee and never took notes or anything like that. I've done that before, but never one that lasted this many months, because she started this with our sources back in November of last year, and this carried through all the way up until the 6th and or 7th of May, when we ran our first story on Cory Mills, May 7th. That was it. She never contacted one of our sources again. And let me give you one more thing. Now, so when I talk about our sources on this story, who we quote on this story, are the people who have been doing the research into stolen valor and other issues related to Cory Mills' past. All right, that's who our sources are. These are people who have been doing that hard work for a long time. But then there's the prime sources. These are the individuals that actually served with Cory Mills in the Army, served with him at DynCorp, and in some cases worked for his company, PACEM, P-A-C-E-M, International, whatever it is. And this agent, even though our sources gave this agent the names of the prime sources, as of the date of the publication of our story, she had never contacted the primes. Mm-hmm. If you're an investigative agent, the prime source is the source. That's who you go to.
All right, very interesting. And you are expecting news now, or updates from the higher ups within the FBI as to whether or not this was sanctioned or off the books or totally improper conduct.
I don't expect that I'll ever hear another damn word from the 7th floor of the Hoover building. Okay, at least not on this story. And let me explain why. The statement they gave us is so unprecedented that I don't think that we'll ever hear from them again. The most likely thing that will happen is that we'll learn through the grapevine, because we do have people positioned in Florida in the Bureau. We will hear from the grapevine that she's either been suspended or, as they do, they'll take their gun and their badge away from them and march them out of the building and suspend them without pay for 1,000 days or something like that. But she'll either be suspended or sanctioned in some manner. And then that's probably the only way that we will ever hear about it, because they're not going to reveal how they're investigating her. But all I can tell you here, without dishonoring my sources in the FBI in DC, is that there is an investigation, as the statement implies that they gave us, mm-hmm. and that it has been run up to the highest levels. They've all been briefed on it, and that we will learn more about this, Viva, through our continued work on Cory. That's where we're going to learn more about this. And by the way, in the story, there's a video link. Agent Shay, in her capacity as a retired colonel of the Army, this past Thursday in a suburb of Orlando, spoke at a Memorial Day event, which I attended along with a couple of people helping me. And we ambushed her. And I asked her, first of all, none of the advertisement for this event, and the local media, there were local media there. And the advertisements never mentioned that she was a current sitting special agent with the FBI. It only mentioned her, her capacity as being a retired colonel of the Army, and all of the ads ran for this event, the city website, et cetera, et cetera. And so when it was all over and said and done, because we weren't going to, we weren't going to dishonor a Memorial Day event. We were not going to create a scene for that. So we held our fire. We waited. And once she was finally alone and walking outside on the sidewalk, I approached her very calmly, very gently. I didn't do the typical ambush journalism thing, get the microphone up in her face. But I just asked her very simply. I said, "Aren't you also an FBI agent?" And she goes, "I don't know. Am I? Don't know about that." And then the next 3 or 4 questions I asked her, she said, "I don't know what you're talking about." I asked her about her relationship with Cory Mills. I asked her if she tried to recruit one of our sources to investigate one of our own reporters. She goes, "I don't know what you're talking about." I mean, she denied any knowledge of anything going on with Cory Mills at all.